Hey guys, welcome back. Hope you're doing well. And in today's video, I'm going to take a look at Luminar AI. I've had it for at least a year or so now, been using it ever since I first had the beta. Again, about a year or so. And I find that now that I've spent so much time with it, I use it in very specific ways. And in particular, I use very specific tools and filters all the time. And so this video is about which tools slash filters I use all the time in Luminar AI and why. To be clear, this is not saying they're the best tools or the best filters in Luminar AI. Best is completely subjective, and this is not my favorite or the best. I guess it's kind of my favorite because it's the ones that I use the most. These are also not necessarily the most powerful filters and tools in Luminar AI. These are just the ones that I use the most. So I'm going to get into that. I do want to clarify I primarily shoot landscapes and cityscapes and some street photography, which means I'm not touching the portrait tools in this video. The portrait tools are awesome. When I do edit portraits, for sure, I go in and use the portrait tools because they're fantastic. I just wanted to point out that based on the subject matter that I tend to shoot, these tools are not portrait tools that I'll be talking about in this video. So let's get going. The very first tool, here's a photo by the way, the very first tool that I use most often is Composition AI. I think there is nothing better than being able to slightly reframe your image after you've shot it. You might be in a spot and have the wrong lens or not get the focal length just right or whatever it might be. And cropping and straightening and all those kind of things really helps. There's obviously a lot of other things you can do here. Obviously straightening is important, but also the perspective correction, being able to fix those verticals. Don't really need it in this photo. However, I do need to crop it. I feel like there's a lot of dead space. If you go back and look at the sky, I mean, there's just, I don't know, it's a little bit of an empty shot in some regard. I like the photo, but I can make it better, and I'm going to start by cropping. And I point that out because I tend to start with Composition AI. For me, it's get your canvas set before you go do anything else, which would be other corrections or creative enhancements. Get your canvas set and then attack. So in this case, I'm going to go ahead and do something like that where I'm getting those people kind of on the that intersection point there. I'm going to tighten that up just a little bit, and I'm going to say done. Gives me a great reframing, so to speak, of the image. That's why I like Composition AI so much. Okay, number two is the light tool. And the very obvious thing here is this is probably, if I made a video about the most powerful tool in Luminar AI, it would probably be the light tool. There's just so much. All the temperature stuff, the light stuff, the black and white point, and of course, curves, which is just super powerful. In this particular photo, I would probably come in and maybe do something with a little bit of contrast, put on the highlights a little bit, maybe pull up the shadows, just kind of move that around a little bit. The thing I like so much is also you can adjust temperature. So look what I do to the photo by adjusting this temperature and this tint. I've got a completely different look to the photo, and one that I like quite a lot, even though it's completely different than how the photo looked. Very golden, very much cooler, and I think both of them work quite well. So it gives you a lot of power, a lot of flexibility, not to mention if you have a raw file, things like DCP profiles, all that. There's just so much you can do. That's why light is number two. Number three, and this is one I use all the time and I use in a lot of videos, and that is Accent AI. It's just a powerful, it's kind of the one slider, the easy button for it, whatever you want to call it. I think I've called it the easy button in a lot of videos, but it gives you a lot of power. It doesn't give you a lot of control though, and that's a big thing to be aware of. Doesn't mean there's anything wrong with it. It's a very powerful slider that does a lot of things. You just want to be careful with it because sometimes you may not want all of those lot of things that it does to impact your image. So it does contrast, it does color pop, it does a lot of things. So just be careful. That's obviously 100 out of control, but it's a great enhancement, in my opinion, to other things. I would generally start with the light tool and do other things and then maybe hit it with a little bit of Accent AI just to give it a little pop, because I think you want to be careful. It's kind of what I think of as a blunt instrument. It comes in and just bam, it hits the photo, and depending on the shot, dragging it really far to the right actually might work, but a lot of shots it's a little too much. So just be careful. Super powerful, super useful. I think it just, use it in soft, small amounts. That's my opinion, but very powerful. I love it. I use it all the time, and that's why it's on the list. Okay, number four is Structure AI. Again, I use this in so many videos. It's just a great, great tool. And one of the things I like most about it is you can use it positive or negative, of course. So when you go to the right with it, you can see you get a little bit of that crunchy look, which is not really necessarily something I would use on this particular photo. But what I might would use on this photo is the negative look, where I'm going for a soft, kind of dreamy shot. And going negative with Structure AI gives you that look. You can see it creates almost a little bit of haze, a little bit of fog. It kind of plays up that soft, gentle kind of look, and I like that quite a bit in a lot of my photos. The thing about Structure AI is I recommend masking it in. So if you want a little bit of crunch, you can come in and you know how to do masking. I've been through this in lots of videos. If not, just check out my videos on masking. But that's one of the things I like about Structure AI. It can be used positively or negatively, like a lot of sliders, but the difference in how it impacts the photo between going fairly positive versus fairly negative is fairly significant. And so that's one of the reasons it's on the list. I use it so much because it can be used either way, and I think it might work great in the same photo, just in different places, hence the masking. And if you need to use it a second time, you can get to it in the local masking under a basic filter. So Structure AI is fantastic, regardless of which way you use it. That's why it's on the list. And moving on, number 5 is color. And I use color a lot, but what I don't really do a lot of is saturation and vibrance. You might come in and do something like that, and on this photo, it looks fine. It looks useful. I would probably pair that with light and some temperature adjustments in order to get the photo kind of looking the way I want it to look. I don't have a plan for this photo, so just kind of playing around here. But the thing I like about color the most is actually HSL. So you go down here, and HSL stands for hue, saturation, and luminance. So you get the shade, the intensity, and the brightness of the colors that are in the image, and you can adjust them accordingly. So for some reason, if you wanted to adjust the hue of this orange, you could create a little bit more red or a little bit more yellow. Maybe you come into the yellows and make some adjustments. You can see that looks like it's a richer, later sunset than it looked before I applied that adjustment. There it is before, and there it is now. And that's just adjusting the hue. You can obviously impact the light values and the intensity as well. And so I love color. I use it all the time. I often do a little bit of saturation and vibrance, but when I'm playing with HSL, I find that I have a huge impact on the final look of my photo. That's why color's on the list. Okay, number 6 is actually in the landscape filter, and it is golden hour. I use it all the time to accentuate those warm tones in a photo. This is all, obviously in an already very warm photo like that, but just hitting it with golden hour, I think that looks quite nice. I don't typically use dehaze that much or foliage enhancer, so I didn't want to call landscape the tool that I use. I specifically use the golden hour slider. And that's the one that I just think comes in so handy, whether it's a sunset or sunrise. It could be a midday shot. It could be a street scene. It picks up those warm tones, gives them a nice little pop, and really helps you accentuate that feeling in a photo. And it could be in a small specific part of a photo where you're just trying to pop those warm tones a little bit. Golden hour is perfect like that, and that's why I find that I'm using it so much. Okay, moving on, number 7 is Supercontrast. I've talked about this one in so many videos, but it's fantastic. I just absolutely adore this tool. I'm really glad that it's in Luminar Neo, but as the name implies, it gives you a lot of powerful control over contrast in your photos. Contrast is the difference between the bright parts and the dark parts. So it's basically, in my opinion, a light shaping tool. Comes in super handy on pretty much every photo, because guess what every photo is made up of? Light, right? So Supercontrast I use all the time. Highlights, midtones, and shadows helps you adjust that, and then these balance sliders help you further refine and shape that light. So in this one, I tend to just move all 3 of the sliders a little bit, and then I'll come in and play around with them. But you can kind of see how it's helping me impact the photo. I kind of like that. I think that looks pretty nice. Let me show you the before and after. There it is before, a little bit flatter. When you don't have contrast applied, your photo will look a little bit flatter, but a nice little pop of contrast really creates a bit more of a silhouette with the people and with that C-stack, and then pops that light in the photo. So Supercontrast, really valuable, really powerful, really useful, honestly, on just about every photo. Again, that's why it's on the list. Okay, while I'm down here in the Pro category, I'm going to go on to Color Harmony, and that's number 8. And you've seen me use it, I'm sure, in a lot of different videos. There are so many color controls here between the brilliance and warmth, the color contrast, the split color warmth, and my personal favorite is at the bottom, color balance, but so much power and control over your images. You can pop the warmth, you can pop the various tones, and just create really kind of any look that you want. Color contrast is fantastic. And like I said, I really enjoy using the color balance section down here. I mean, look at that. That just gives me a nice, beautiful, kind of soft sunset. It's got some warmth, but it also has some coolness. I tend to like that a lot in my kind of sunset or late in the day, edges of the day photos, which is a little bit of blue, cooler tones along with the warmer tones. I like that versus just a completely warm, kind of hot looking sunset. So color harmony lets me go from something like that to that with just a couple of sliders. So powerful. I've gone into this in multiple videos. I'm not going to belabor the point here, but color harmony, super powerful, super valuable, amazing color control over what's in your image. And when you pair that with HSL back up here in color, which I already talked about, you get incredible color control, which for me is a big deal when I'm editing an image. So color harmony, by far one of my favorites for sure in Luminar AI. Number 9 on the list is toning, also known as split toning in other apps, but it basically lets you take highlights or shadows and apply a specific color tone and an amount or saturation level to each of them. So in this one, if you wanted to warm up the highlights, you can come in and do something like that, and you just drag the saturation slider and you pick your hue. In this case, I'm on a warmer hue, but if I wanted to cool those off a little bit, I can create a very different look by doing so. I could come into the shadows and do something similar. Let me get the hue over here to the cooler look, and you can see I've really taken a warm image and made it a much cooler image in a couple of seconds just using split toning or toning. So there it is before and there it is now. I recommend experimenting with this. It's a very, very powerful color and tone control tool. If you're going to use that with color balance and color HSL, just be careful what you do. I tend to bounce between those three a lot when I'm making color adjustments in my images, just because they can have a really profound effect on an image, and you want to be careful not to go too far. So all of these tools I tend to use in tandem, but I'll often make adjustments and then bounce back and do some refinements, bounce forward, adjust, back, forward, that sort of thing. So it's a bit of a, I don't want to call it musical chairs, but there's a lot of back and forth when I'm using these tools, especially around color, because I want to get it looking just the way I want it to look. But toning, very valuable, very powerful, and certainly very useful. That's why it's on the list. Number 10 is mystical, and this is just a kind of a softy, I've got a soft spot for it, and it's just simply because it creates this kind of moody, mystical kind of look, but it creates some contrast in your photos, so be careful if you're using super contrast. Note that this also will increase some contrast, create some shadow for you, as it's doing here. If you look at the before and after, it also tends to soften up the image. So if you're pairing this with structure AI and you're going negative in structure, just know you're going to create some softness in the image. I like that kind of dreamy look, especially when you have a landscape, something like this, that's a little bit moody. You can increase or decrease smoothing and adjust shadows if you get a little too heavy-handed there. And then there's some color effects as well. But bottom line is it creates a lot of mood, I think, in a photo. And that's something I like in my photos. I like creating a little bit of drama, a little bit of mood, a little bit of tension, that sort of thing. Mystical comes in handy for that. Very powerful, very useful. That's why it's on the list. And the last tool, I'm just going back to the very top section, and that is Vignette. Vignette, I mean, it's a very basic tool in terms of what it does. What does it do? It darkens the edges, but so much power and flexibility here to really control how the viewer is viewing your subject, because you have the ability to come in and choose a subject. So maybe I want everybody kind of focused over here, kind of between those people standing on the beach and that sea stack. And so when you choose subject, you're basically going to allow the vignette to be applied heavier in other parts of the image and not where they are, because that's basically now the center of the vignette. Speaking of centers, there's this inner light slider. Honestly, one of my favorite sliders in any tool, in any product, anywhere, because it's just a brilliant idea. But you create that vignette, you darken those edges, so you're really focusing the eye. The eye is drawn into things that are bright or colorful. That inner light really helps you draw the eye in, because you can brighten that center of the vignette. So I use that all the time. So being able to choose subject in combination with that inner light, super powerful, so much control over an image. I just love how it helps you kind of shape the light. So again, it goes with other things like Supercontrast and other tools, and all of these tools really work well together. Just again, keep in mind, you want to be careful. You don't do too much Supercontrast and then try to do a heavy vignette. You might get some really dark areas that you want to control. So I tend, like I said, to bounce around a little bit. There's never a straight from point A to point Z. For me in editing, it's A to B to F to G to W, you know what I mean? It's a bit of a, I hate to call it musical chairs, it's all I can think of. I just move around a lot. But these are the tools that I use the most simply because they give me so much control over my final results in Luminar AI. And after a year or so of using this tool pretty much every day, these are the ones that I find myself using again and again and again. And the reason why? Power and control. So that's it for this video, my friends. Hope it gives you some insight into my thought process of how I use these tools in Luminar AI and why. They're amazing. They're powerful. Go have fun with it. I hope it gives you some ideas. Thanks for watching, my friends. And until next time, adios.